I have made a series of very bad decisions, and I cannot make another one.
Why did you make these decisions?
For the good of my family.
Then they weren't bad decisions. What does a man do, Walter? A man provides for his family. And he does it even when he's not appreciated, or respected, or even loved. He simply bears up, and he does it because he's a man.
One of the foundations of the Breaking Bad universe is the study of actions and reactions. Using chemistry as a model, Vince Gilligan and his team of writers created a complex tapestry in which all the events are connected, and every character's choice has consequences. It is only logical that with this kind of foundations, a major theme in both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul would be responsibility, and its decline in a society increasingly prone to embrace a culture of victimhood. The culture of responsibility and the culture of victimhood clash over and over. Some characters stay faithful to one until the end, and others change along the way. And in the middle, there's Jesse Pinkman.
Yeah, bitch!
Being responsible is the basic characteristic required from a fully developed adult. The ability to understand that our actions have consequences and that we are accountable for the decisions we make is crucial, both in a business and in everyday life. That doesn't mean, like some might think, that the responsible person always plays safe. They can take risks, and often that leads them to success, but in case of failure, they are ready to accept and deal with the consequences. Mike Ehrmantraut, Gus Fring, Hank Schrader, and Howard Hamlin are all perfect examples of responsible characters, each one in his own way. They all prioritize duty over personal gratification, be it Mike and Hank's duty towards their families and the people they protect with their jobs, or Gus and Howard's duty towards their respective businesses. No matter how tough things become for each of them, they remain responsible until the very end. Hank's story is particularly effective in showing us the flip side of responsibility. After his assignment in Texas, Hank is extremely shocked, and while his sense of duty would push him to accept a job in El Paso to move his career forward, what happened during his last trip to the border left a deep mark on him. He can't openly admit that he is afraid, but at the same time, his resilience is not enough to face the situation. Howard finds himself in a moment of extreme crisis too, both professional and personal, after the death of Chuck McGill. His reaction, though, is to take the time to address his issues in a healthy way, going to therapy, an option that Hank wouldn't consider because of pride. Gus and Mike did something even more radical in terms of responsibility. They both faced a shocking event that you can't fully recover from, the death of a partner and the death of a son. In both cases, they had some responsibility in the tragic demise of their loved ones, but they both found a new purpose starting from there. Gus embraced the responsibility of making the project he and Max were working on a reality, along with the responsibility of avenging his death. Mike found a new reason to carry on in taking care of his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter. Responsibility is the hardest way to choose. It requires patience, discipline, and resilience, because responsible people often end up carrying their burdens alone.
Look, I'm validated for the entire day, okay? 5 stickers, 6 stickers, I don't know from stickers, because I was in that court back there saving people's lives, so.
Oh, gee, that's swell. and thank you for restoring my faith in the judicial system. Now, you either pay the $3 or you go back inside and you get an additional sticker.
Playing the victim card, on the other hand, is a shortcut to get other people's sympathy. It is a manipulation tactic that can be very effective in moving people to your side, while deflecting the responsibility for your own actions onto someone else. Walter White is definitely a master at this kind of game, since he is constantly trying to manipulate everyone around him in order to get what he wants.
To keep me in line, he took my children. For 3 months, he kept them. My wife had no idea of my criminal activities, was horrified to learn what I had done. I was in hell. I hated myself for what I had brought upon my family.
Jimmy McGill and Kim Wexler also played the victim card often, but they were more subtle in doing so. Victimhood is more of a coping mechanism for them than something to weaponize in order to control people. Unlike Walt, they are actually convinced of their status of victims. They firmly believe that all their failures are caused by other people's actions, and not by their own choices. All three characters, though, end up taking responsibility for their own actions eventually, in different ways and facing different consequences. Marie and Skyler, on the other hand, are both part of this culture of victimhood from the beginning, but they take very different paths compared to the others. Marie starts as the childish, spoiled upper middle class woman who steals stuff and pretends to be someone else at open houses, out of boredom and to get attention. But once reality knocks at her door in the form of her husband almost getting killed, she makes a complete 180 and starts working hard to support him. Marie's wake-up call turns her into a responsible woman. Skyler is a die-hard self-proclaimed victim. She plays the victim card over and over. She has public breakdowns. She acts like she's a prisoner of her violent husband, when in reality, she actually is very much his accomplice. And until the end, she has the audacity of giving people that jaded look, even though she is totally responsible for her misfortunes. Chuck McGill has yet a different journey from the others. He used to be an extremely responsible man. He made his way up to the top playing by the rules, but that didn't prevent him from losing his wife in the end. And that fact led him to a breakdown. From that point, Chuck found comfort in playing the victim, making up a crippling condition to avoid dealing with the harsh reality. That also gave him the opportunity to manipulate Jimmy and Howard in his attempt to sabotage his brother's career.
God, Jimmy. Don't you know by now this is real? I feel this. It's a physical response to stimuli. It's not a quirk. What do I have to do to prove it to you?
Chuck's famous meltdown in Chicanery perfectly illustrates how a person with a victim complex can go all the way to denying clear evidence in their attempt to convince others of their righteousness.
You bumped into him in the stairway. He'll testify he planted this fully charged battery on you over an hour and a half ago.
Hour and 43 minutes.
An hour and 43 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Babineau. And you felt nothing.
No, it's a trick. It has
Enough
to...
is enough. I submit that Mr. McGill's mental illness is a non-issue. If he were schizophrenic, it wouldn't take away from the fact that the defendant...
am not crazy!
I am not crazy.
We can read desperation, anxiety, and fear in Chuck's words. When someone lives in constant denial, the closer they get to facing the truth, the messier their attempts to convince others become. Their brains are overloaded with information to process all at the same time. Truth, lies, what do I believe in? What do I want others to believe? What do they believe? Wait, do they see me now?
He'll never change. Ever since he was 9, always the same. Couldn't keep his hands out of the cash drawer. But not our Jimmy. Couldn't be precious Jimmy. Stealing them blind. And he gets to be a lawyer? What a sick joke. I should have stopped him when I had the chance. And you have to stop him.
Walter White spends most of his time on screen with this kind of conflict in his mind. He isn't always as good as a liar as you think he is, and as the number of stories he makes up to cover his illegal activities grows, the harder it becomes for him to come up with believable excuses. On the other hand, he manages to get away with so many things that in the end, his whole perception of reality gets compromised. Mike is the character that more than any other clashes with Walt. Over the last 2 seasons of the show, their conflict grows along with the mess that Walt creates, and Mike has to clean up.
And so, transportation is worth 20%?
They're taking a risk.
$275,000 worth of risk? Wow. What did Gus pay his mules?
Gustavo Fring didn't use mules. He didn't need them. He spent 20 years building his own distribution. He had 16 refrigerator trucks running his product.
It is definitely a generational clash, but even more an ideological one. Mike's moral code versus Walt's complete lack of morality. Mike's cautious and rational approach to problems versus Walt's reckless and chaotic one. In the middle of this fight, there is Jesse, who represents the real anomaly in the Breaking Bad universe when it comes to responsibility.
My guys are keeping their mouths shut. We make them whole. One hand washes the other. It's as simple as that.
It sounds like a simple shakedown, simple as that. We're paying for their silence. That's blackmail.
Business is my end. This is business. End of story.
This is your problem. It should come out of your end.
Hey, just take it out of mine. All right? Go for it. I don't care. Just take it.
Jesse Pinkman can be easily dismissed at first as a street thug, an illiterate junkie running from responsibilities. That's the way Walt saw him, but also everyone else. Gus and Mike didn't trust him. He was considered a problem when Walt wanted to start working with them.
Your partner was late, and he was high.
Yes. Yes, he was.
He's high often, isn't he?
But the truth is that Jesse was a troubled young man who chose the streets as an act of rebellion towards his parents, who were pushing him to live a life they planned for him. No one considered him valuable for what he was before Walt. In a twisted way, he seemed to need his skills, and Jesse was vulnerable enough to be manipulated. Walt benefited from Jesse's lack of self-confidence and fueled his insecurities so he could control him. He needed Jesse to join him into the victim mentality.
I don't know what's wrong with me, Mr. White. I don't know how I could be so stupid.
Stop that now. Come on. Come on. Come on.
I'm so sorry.
Kicking the hell out of yourself doesn't give meaning to anything.
So I should stop judging and accept.
To start.
So no matter what I do, hooray for me because I'm a great guy. It's all good.
After the Gale situation, Gus realized that actually the problem might have been Walt the whole time. So he had Mike taking Jesse under his wing. Mike recognizes Jesse's qualities pretty soon in their collaboration and becomes a sort of mentor for him. Unlike Walt, he is not interested in manipulating him. He manages to make him responsible by giving him space to cultivate his talent, while at the same time keeping him in line, leading by example. Mike doesn't sit down to make big speeches to Jesse. His calm and disciplined attitude does the work for him, especially after all the noise and chaos that Walt has overwhelmed Jesse with. In a sense, the conflict between Mike and Walt at some point becomes a fight for Jesse's soul. Walt's influence on Jesse is so strong that even Mike's death will not be enough to free him. But on the other end, Jesse embracing responsibility and finally facing the truth about the man he worked with for the past year is the moment that marks the end of Heisenberg's empire. There are different degrees of victimhood, as there are different degrees of responsibility. Some play the victim as a way to cope with failure, because they find it too hard to make the extra step to achieve their goals. This is something most people do at least once in their lives.
So you're just gonna throw it all away? I mean, you busted your ass for all of it.
I'm not throwing it away. I did S&C. I did Mesa Verde. I achieved that. I had that experience, but it doesn't make me happy.
All right, pro bono is wonderful. It is, but pro bono means no money. So what's the plan here?
I don't know, but I'll figure it out.
This kind of behavior is more common in younger people and usually gets fixed as part of growing up, but it also goes hand in hand with depression, so it is definitely not something to take lightly. People who behave like that can still be responsible to some extent, so I would consider it a borderline behavior. Some people genuinely feel like they are victims at the first sign of hardship because they spent most of their lives without any significant struggle and always had someone dealing with problems on their behalf. These people are loud, entitled, and messy in their reaction to troubles. They are convinced every issue they face is someone else's fault, and therefore they can demand for the issue to be solved without even trying to address it personally. The majority of these self-proclaimed victims never changes, especially if they fall into the narcissist category. Only a traumatic event that makes them face reality can potentially lead them to a more responsible path. Other people yet trap themselves into a delusion as a reaction to a traumatic event. This kind of behavior is definitely more serious and calls for some professional help. Otherwise, there is hardly any way for them to get out of the prison they built for their own mind.
You gotta do something. You can't let her leave like this. Just tell her what's going on. No. She'll understand. Would you rather she think you're a raging prick than know the truth? No. Look, if you won't tell her, then I will.
No. You will not tell her. You will not tell her.
People falling in all of these categories feel the need for others' support and approval. Things that the responsible don't necessarily need. Like I said, the journey of a responsible person is often a lonely one, because it involves facing problems directly. Sometimes other people's help is necessary to overcome hardships, but the most responsible people are those who would stand their ground, even if everyone else left. An excess on the responsibility side can also lead to very bad outcomes, because pushing discipline and accuracy beyond the limit can lead to obsession and other pathological behaviors. If Jesse stands in the middle, being pulled towards each side alternatively, Marie has the most positive journey of personal growth, going from entitled to responsible and supportive wife to actual victim who doesn't give up on getting justice for her husband. As always, this is just what I got from watching the shows, and there is a chance I might be wrong. But I think in a world plagued by widespread narcissism and victim mentality, returning to a culture of responsibility is the necessary first step if we want to solve any problem together as a society. It all starts from everyone's personal effort.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Okay, Karen.